Hi, ladies and gentlemen. For the people who don't know me, my name is Steve Harney, and I'm the founder of Keeping Current Matters. Um, I'm here this morning because we have a lot of trepidation in the market, and there's a lot of concern with buyers and sellers as far as pricing is concerned. So we want to do what we call a deep dive. But before we get started, I want to just let everyone know that I understand the challenges you're up against in the market right now. Very obviously, the number of transactions is down. But I also want you to understand, owning a real estate business is not like owning a McDonald's, it's like owning an Apple store. What do I mean by that? Very simply this. If we assume there is a snowstorm in the town and the snow came piling down, what would wind up taking place is a lot of people would decide not to drive during the snowstorm until they actually plowed the streets. If you owned a McDonald's, you'd lose that business, whether it be that one night dinner or that dinner, breakfast the next morning and lunch the next day until they got the streets cleared. You would lose all of that business because people would not delay eating, they would just eat at home. But if you owned an Apple store and somebody was thinking about buying an iPad and then the snowstorm hit, they don't decide not to buy an iPad. They still have every intention of buying it, but they have to wait for the streets to clear. So if you owned an Apple store, you don't lose one transaction. They're just delayed. And that's what's happening in your business right now. You're not going to miss one deal, but you're going to have the patience to wait for that deal to come, because in using my metaphor, we're in a little bit of a snowstorm right now. Once that snow is cleared, what's going to wind up taking place is not only you're going to have the business that would normally flow in that day, you're also going to have that backup demand that's going to come in. So spend this time right now doing whatever deals we can do, and we'll help you with that as we go through the deep dive. But I also want you to realize you have to get yourself prepared, because when that floodgates open, you're going to have that business that would normally be there, plus that pent-up business that's going to come rushing to the market. So please, it requires patience, I get that. But don't think you're going to lose that money. That money's just being delayed right now. Now let's get started with the deep dive. The deep dive is a very, very, very simple thing, ladies and gentlemen. Every Monday, what we attempt to do is we try to go ahead and help you understand what's taking place on one aspect of our business right now. We go deep on that aspect. So instead of like thinking about, well, this is going to happen, this is not going to happen, what we're going to do is we're going to actually dive way down deep into the water, just like you see up on your screen now, to find out what's really, really taking place. And every Monday we do this. This particular Monday, we're going to talk about what happened to prices last year and why is there so much confusion. It's really part one of a two-part series. Next week, David Childers, the president of Keeping Current Matters, is going to give you the second part. I'm going to explain to you what happened last year coming into this January. Next week, he's going to take the time to explain to you what's going to happen in 2023. You need both of them in order to really sit down with a homeowner and explain it. So this education, there's going to be members that are subscribers to KCM on this particular deep dive, and there's going to be many that are not members. All right? But what we want to do is make sure that as many realtors as possible are educated as to what's taking place in the market right now. So let's get started. What caused the panic in the second half of last year? And there was a panic, ladies and gentlemen. What wound up taking place is, let's take a look at how we were entering this year. What happened at the end of 2022 to bring us into the confusion we're in right now? Fannie Mae does a survey, and they do it every single month. And one of the questions they ask in the survey is, what do you think is going to happen to prices over the next 12 months? These are the results of how many people, what percentage of Americans think that prices were going to fall, decrease, depreciate over the next 12 months. And as we can see from the slide very easily, as far back as Fannie Mae did the survey back in 2010, for the 12 years, 13 years since then, it kind of ranged somewhere about, if you average that out, somewhere in the 10-11% range. Last December, that number shot up to 37%. We ended this year with a larger percentage of Americans thinking prices were going to fall through 2023 than we had in the last 12 years. So it's important that we get that we understand that. That's where the panic was coming from. What caused that panic? There were some over-the-top forecasts at the end of 2022. Like really over the top. The challenge was those forecasts were given by people that are renowned, people that are very well respected. They just got it wrong. For example, Jeremy Siegel, professor at Wharton School of Business. I expect home prices to fall 10 to 15%, and the housing prices are accelerating on the downside. So last fall, beginning of last winter, a professor at the Wharton School of Business said prices are going to fall 10 to 15%, and to be honest with you, it's kind of accelerating and might fall even more than that. Goldman Sachs came out saying their research home price model suggests home prices will decline by around 5 to 10% from the peak in the United States. Economists at Goldman Sachs research say there are risks that housing markets could decline more than their model suggests. So they're suggesting it's going to fall 5 to 10%, but in reality, they're saying it's probably going to fall even more than that. And this was headline after headline after headline. We both know that, or we all know, that bad news spreads faster. And that was bad news. And that was a headline across the nation. And then Mark Zandi, the renowned and very well-respected chief economist in Moody's Analytics, he went to a different level. Typically, it takes a while for sellers to cut asking prices as they psychologically can't give up on the highest Zillow price that they've seen for their homes. Not this time. Sellers are caving. Buckle in. Assuming rates remain near the current 6.5%, he's talking about mortgage rates, and the economy skirts a recession, then national house prices will fall 10% peak to throw. Most of these declines will happen sooner rather than later. So we had three major sources, and there were many, many others. I don't want to bore you with all of them. But we had Goldman Sachs, we had a professor at the Wharton School of Business, and we had one of the most acclaimed economists in the country saying prices are going to fall pretty dramatically. And they all warned that they might fall even more dramatically than they first said. Well, obviously, that had an impact on the American psyche. So what did these headlines cost us? That survey I just showed you, saying what percentage of Americans think prices are going to fall, I went back and did it month by month, all the way back to 2010 when they first started their survey. And what we can see, ladies and gentlemen, very easily, is that in the aftermath of the housing crash, very obviously those numbers were up. That's the gray all the way to the left. Then it kind of leveled out to what the normal numbers would be. And then during the pandemic, very obviously, when the pandemic hit, everyone thought that prices were going to come crashing down. They didn't, but that's what people thought was going to happen. Then it settled out again. But then going into last fall and winter, look at the red bars. It was greater than the aftermath of the great financial crisis back in the middle of the 2000s. It was greater than what happened during the pandemic, and it lasted longer. That panic, the percentage of that panic is still in the market. And it's our job to make sure we turn around and explain to people there's nothing to panic about. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that panic is causing some people not to put their houses on the market. It's causing some people not to purchase right now. If someone was thinking about moving up, and let's assume they had plenty of equity in their house and they're not even worried about mortgage rate, then what would wind up taking place is they would turn around and say, well, if prices are going to fall, maybe I shouldn't move at all. And if you're thinking that the red bars were because of mortgage rates, well, they were seeing mortgage rates climb. Well, actually, no. It was all about the headlines that they were looking at. Because if we take those red bars and spread them out and overlay, that black bar overlays, how many people, what percentage of people, of Americans, thought that mortgage rates were going to go down? While they thought prices were going to go down, they also thought mortgage rates were going to go down. So it wasn't the mortgage rates that were scaring them last fall and winter. It was the headlines. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have to figure that out. How can we combat the fear that's already in the market, caused by headlines. The first thing we have to do, all right, and understand exactly what caused the fear. Bill McBride, inventory picked up sharply in 2022, I adjusted my outlook in October 2022 and wrote house prices 7 years in purgatory. I noted that a 10% decline in nominal prices now seem likely. So Bill McBride is very well respected, quoted in the Wall Street Journal, quoted in the New York Times. He's the founder of Calculated Risk blog, a very, very well-renowned blog on financial situations in the economy. He came out saying, well, prices aren't going to move at all for 7 years, and that they were going to drop, first off, by about 10%. He got it wrong. At least he admitted he got it wrong. Because just the other day, however, the inventory surge in 2022 was somewhat of a head fake. We'll explain that in a second. Some potential sellers quickly listed their homes, probably remembering what happened with house prices in 2006 to 2011 period. But that surge ended pretty quickly. So what is he saying? He's saying that what many analysts and economists were saying, people are going to panic. The economy's not doing well, mortgage rates are jumping up, they're going to throw the house on the market because they have to sell it now before they drop by that 10, 15, 20% that people were talking about. Well, that didn't happen, but let me explain to you why they thought it might. This is new listings were expected to skyrocket, and let me explain to you why. Those light colored lines, the blue, the gray, and the darker blue, the smaller lines, show what normally happens. And that's in 2017, 18, and 19, a normal market. What happens to inventory? It builds during the early part of the year, and then it falls off. New listings coming to the market falls off toward the end of the year. That's the seasonality in our industry. But what the economists and analysts saw was, you see that black dotted line going down the middle? That's the peak normally. That's the peak in May. And as soon as it hits the peak, every year it comes back down the other side. Well, look what happened between May and June of last year. It didn't come down the other side. It actually shot up. That's the head fake Bill McBride was talking about. They assumed that because that 1 month went that way, that the rest of the year was going to go that way. That there was going to be a flood of inventory of sellers, homeowners, afraid the house was going to drop in value, going ahead and selling it. Well, I know they thought that was going to happen, but that's not what happened. In reality, this is what took place. Not only did it dropped lower than it had ever been. We have less inventory now than a normal market, and it dropped at a quicker rate. So what does that mean? Well, that meant that that rush of inventory that was going to come to the market. Remember, price is determined by supply and demand. Interest rates are going up, mortgage rates are going up, so it was going to curtail demand. And they thought a flood of inventory was going to come to the market. Supply was up, demand was down, prices had to come down. Well, the only problem is supply didn't go up. The other thing they were concerned about was, they said, well, if there's a recession coming and it's the end of the moratorium, foreclosure moratorium, there was going to be a tsunami of foreclosures coming to the market. Well, we're still waiting for the recession, and I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I've been waiting for 3 years. They're telling me it's going to happen. And it looks like we might have a softer landing, meaning the recession won't have as big a challenge. And we'll cover that a little bit more next week, the recession part of it. But what we're talking about now is, why did the experts think that prices were going to fall? Well, there was going to be this tsunami of foreclosures coming to the market. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here are the real numbers. Now, you've heard some crazy headlines that, just came out saying that foreclosures are up 185% over 2 years ago. Well, that's true. They are up 185% over 2 years ago. But 2 years ago, we had a moratorium, and no one was allowed to foreclose on anyone. So if you had one foreclosure and went up 100%, you'd have two foreclosures. The numbers were so low, the percentage increases up. But if we look at the real numbers, we're still much lower. These are foreclosures in the first 6 months of each of those years. There's not a flood of foreclosures coming to the market. We'll get back to more normal numbers of like 14, 15, 16, because every year there are foreclosures. But the market we're in right now is going to be able to absorb those foreclosures. Now, I'm not saying foreclosures will be a good thing because it's inventory. Every foreclosure impacts a family. And if there are children in that family, it impacts those children. And my heart goes out to those. But every year in this country, people run into challenges. They lose their job, they get sick. Something takes place that they can no longer make the mortgage payment. There will be foreclosures coming to the market. And eventually those numbers will reach normal numbers. Again, 17, 18, 19 numbers. But what people are trying to say is they're going to hit numbers back during the big financial crash. Well, that's not true. We're already seeing that that's not true. And delinquency rates, when people say, well, we just have to wait a little bit, delinquency rates are at an all-time low. So they kind of got it wrong, ladies and gentlemen, and that's what's important for us to understand. So let's take a look at what actually happened in 2022 as far as prices are concerned. Here is we went back and did 48 years. Oh, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to let you know, the KCM blog today actually did a blog on this issue, on the foreclosure issue. So if you're a member, you know that you can go ahead and send that out with your name, like it's your blog. You can have your name, your contact information, everything there. You should do that. It's important. A lot of people are confused about this foreclosure issue. If you're on this deep dive and you're not a member, you can go to keepingcurrentmatters.com blog, and you can go to the blog and you can copy and paste it and send it out to whoever you think you should send it out to. And if not, just read it. While you're on the blog, you might want to subscribe to it. If you're not even a member, we'll send it to you every single day without cost. Just log in and say, I want to get the blog. There's some great information that the team puts together every single day on aspects of the business. Now let's get back to this. This is the 48-year average monthly price movement. What does that mean? We took Case-Shiller and said, over the last 48 years, how much did prices rise in January, on average? How much did prices rise in February over the last 48 years, by average? And what you'll see, ladies and gentlemen, there is a seasonality. What winds up taking place is prices start to rise a little bit at the beginning of the year. Then as we get into the buying season, they rise more rapidly. Then when we get past the buying season into the summer, they fall off. They don't depreciate. There's no red lines on this graph, red bars on this graph. But the level of appreciation decelerates. That's not the same as depreciation. But again, we'll cover that in more detail next week. What I want you to understand is that there is a seasonality to how much prices go up each month. Now let's take a look to see what happened last year. Now I'm going to take this graph and condense it, compress it. The reason I'm doing that is because I want to show you what happened last year. That's the 48-year average. It's this graph compressed. Now let's take a look and see what happened last year. Well, very obviously, ladies and gentlemen, we understand there was a challenge. We overshot the average in January by 10 times. We overshot the average in February by over 6 times. We overshot the average in March by over 4 times. And we overshot the average in April by 2.5 times. Appreciation got out of control. It wasn't anywhere near the normal averages. And that happened all the way through June. Prices skyrocketed way too quickly. What had to happen after that? A correction. And that's exactly what happened the last 6 months of the year. It was a correction. It went up too fast, too high, the first 6 months. In the second 6 months, we had to make that correction. The market had to make that correction, which it did. So now, when we're looking at this, ladies and gentlemen, it's important that we understand that we came into this year with a lot of people being confused. A lot of people. Since the beginning of the year, things got a little bit better. That number fell off 37, stayed at 37 in January, but the percentage of Americans who still think prices are going to go down is at 26% as of the June. That's the latest survey results. And we have to realize that Well, if that's the case, that is still greater than 1 out of 4 people still believe prices are going to go down, that's going to limit them putting the house on the market. Forget about mortgage rate. Forget about everything else. If they think prices are going to fall, especially if they think prices are going to fall dramatically, they're just going to sit and wait. We have to make sure that we educate that 1 in 4 what's really taking place in the market. And ladies and gentlemen, understand that I get that there's a lot of things we could do right now. We could decide whether we want to be on Twitter or we want to be on Threads. We could decide what our marketing campaign should be on Facebook. The single most important thing we could do right now is go out and talk to people. Help them understand exactly what's taking place in the market. That's our job. That's what we get paid to do. Educate people. Help them understand that the panic that they might be feeling is a little unfounded. It was caused by people making the wrong guess last fall and last winter. It's up to us to make that correction. And ladies and gentlemen, we could have a big impact. There was a study done by 1000watt. Mark Davidson, one of the founders of 1000watt, is a very good friend of mine. When his survey showed, they surveyed homeowners that were thinking about selling a house and talked to an agent. If they were thinking about selling a house, they weren't sure, and they talked to an agent, 65%, 2 out of 3, were more likely to go ahead and list their house just because they talked to an agent. What does that say? We have to talk to more people. Remember, 1 out of 4 might not be making a move out of fear. We can alleviate that fear by sitting down and explaining to them what's really taking place. That's our job, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get in front of people and explain it to them and understand what 1 out of 4 means. If you walk down your block, every 4th house, on average, that homeowner is not sure what's happening. When you have a family get-together, if you have 20 people there, 5 of them don't know what's happening. If you walk out of your church, a house of worship, this weekend, and there's 400 people, 100 of them don't understand. That's a big number. We can talk to those people. We can help those people. And the best way to do that is talk to them what's happening with prices now. Now, again, we're going to go into depth in this next week and talk about, where is it as far as seasonality is concerned, what the forecasts are going forward. But let me just tell you where we are right now so you can start talking to people right now. What we are showing there is the Case-Shiller, the FHFA, and the CoreLogic. Their numbers are through April. These are repeat sales indexes, meaning they had to take time to see which houses sold. This is not median prices. That's not a good price to use, a good home price index to use right now. You want to know really what is happening with each individual house. So it takes them a little bit. So the latest numbers are the April numbers. I will tell you that the May numbers are coming out tomorrow, and we'll make sure we get that done and we get the graphs updated so you have that stuff, especially the members. You'll have it. I'm going to be recording the next MMR, which is for the people who are not members. That's our monthly market report where we take all of the issues, put them together in one presentation that we give once a month, where we give the narrative that our members should be sharing with their clients. Okay, so this is just one issue of that narrative. We put the whole narrative together for them in MMR. And this month's MMR, which I'll record next week, will have all the updated ones. But you can already see, looking at these graphs, that what happened? Exactly what I said. Prices went up too high at the beginning of last year. They adjusted in the second half of last year. And now they're coming back. And every one of the graphs says the same thing. Prices are on a rebound. There are some that have made numbers out already. Zillow, Black Knight, and Freddie Mac. All of them are saying the same thing. All 6 graphs are saying the same thing. All 6 home price indexes are saying the same thing. Prices went up too much at the beginning of last year. There had to be a correction in the second half of last year. But now that the correction's been made, we're going back to more normal appreciation. Robert Shiller, the economist from Yale and part of the Case-Shiller Index, he was giving interviews this week explaining that. Now, the headlines are going to be, well, Robert Shiller says that prices aren't going to go up like they have been. Well, yeah, that's true. They're not going to go up like they did the last couple of years. We had like almost a 50% appreciation over the last 3 years. That's not going to happen again. What he's saying is we're going to get back to normal appreciation. He even uses the words seasonality. And that is what's going to take place. We'll get back, and we'll talk about the forecast again next week. We'll get back to more normal appreciation. That doesn't mean depreciation. It doesn't mean house prices are going to crash. The headlines might kind of allude to that with Mr. Shiller's comments. But if you actually read his comments, what he's saying is the last couple of years were kind of crazy, and we're not going to have crazy years going forward. And I agree with him. Now, there is no doubt, this is Andy Walden, Vice President of Enterprise Research at Black Knight. There is no doubt that the housing market has reignited from a home price perspective. Firming prices have now fully erased the pullback we tracked through the last half of 2022, lifted the seasonal adjusted Black Knight home price index to a new record high in May. What does that say? That's saying that not only have prices come back, that their national index, and every market's a little bit different. Obviously, Austin hasn't come back yet. All right? But as a nation, we're on the path, and the national number is already higher than the highest number last year. And that's just true healthy appreciation as we go forward, ladies and gentlemen. Just healthy appreciation. Now, what I'm going to ask of you is pretty simple. The reason we do the deep dive every week is we want to give you a really deep understanding of what's taking place in the market on one issue. And we have that issue right now. People are confused about what's happening with house values. The only people, the only group, the only army that can go ahead and fight the misconceptions that are out there are the people listening right now. That's our responsibility in every way we can do it. And remember, all the KCM subscribers, all these slides are available to you. If you want to go ahead and download them, they'll be up, probably by the end of the day on the KCM page. So you have that. The people who aren't subscribers, I'll give you a hack. You can subscribe at trykcm.com, download the slides, and then cancel your subscription if that's what you want to do. But I do think that the information we're giving is crucially important. Crucially important. It's our job to get out there, not worrying about whether we're on Twitter or Threads, not worrying about crazy stuff and lawsuits between the two different real estate firms, or whether or not somebody's sex tapes are being released. We should be worried about the people we serve, our clients. They depend on us to keep them informed. That's what we do for a living. Let's make sure we live up to that. There's never been a more important time. During the financial crisis, everyone kind of understood what was screwing everything up. Obviously, during the pandemic, everyone understood what was screwing things up. We just had to work through it. People are confused about what's happening right now. And we have the answers to alleviate that confusion. And if we don't do that soon, that confusion is going to turn into fear. And if the fear mounts, it's going to be paralysis. And more people are going to be locked in, not buying and selling a house. Not because they shouldn't buy or sell a house, because they're afraid to. Let's not let that happen. Thank you very much for spending 30 minutes of your life with me today. I hope I gave you something back in return. You know that I believe very, very strongly in home ownership. Those who do know me, if you don't, I'm telling you, I believe very strongly in home ownership and the power of home ownership. both from a financial situation and from a social situation, the tremendous amount of benefits. Let's help people realize how important it is. We know that. Let's make sure they know that. Thanks again for everything you do. Jess, do we have any questions by any chance?
Hi, Steve. I have lots of people
Can't hear
very.
you, Jess.
Can you hear me now?
Well, I can't hear, Jess, so I don't know if there are any questions, but this is what I promise you that I'll do. I'll make sure that if there are any questions, that I find that person and we answer them either right on the thread or we'll email you the answers. So thank you very much again for being here and